cute bun.
Hello, everybody. All right, welcome back. So we're going to talk about Stranger Things. We binge watched all 4 seasons, which means it's kind of muddled together. So I've got on the board here
Binge for us. We didn't
some.
ever watch more than one episode a
No,
day.
but we watched one each day, and so we got through seasons 1 through 4. We'll go ahead and discuss. If you haven't seen Stranger Things, what are you doing here? But secondly, if you're worried about spoilers, haven't you watched it yet? Like, it feels like we're one of the last people to watch it on planet Earth. So, of course, with season 1, you have main characters of Joyce, played by Winona Ryder, who's absolutely fantastic. She's not aging, which is obnoxious. I swear she looks better now than she did in the 80s. I don't know how that works. I don't look better than I did in the 80s, so it's not right. Will, who is barely in the first season, and I remember first time I watched it through, I thought, so was he dead? Like, is it possible he's gone? But yeah, especially when they showed the Demogorgon, I'm like, yeah, so there's no way he's alive. But yeah,
that happens a lot in the show.
It does, and it's interesting to me that the Demogorgon seems to kill everybody except Will. So maybe it's because there's a connection.
But he hid from him in that play.
Yeah,
thing.
but if you look at Nancy's friend, yeah. Anyways, Hopper, of course, Jim. I like Hopper. His character completely changes. He starts out as kind of a bumbling sheriff, and by the end of it, he is Chuck Norris. He's Sylvester Stallone.
He can run faster than explosions.
It just feels, yeah. He jumped out of the way. No, he didn't. So you got Mike. Mike changes a lot from the first to the 4th season.
He's a good character, though. They did good with how he changed as he was growing up. Yeah, they did good with him.
But by the time you reach season 4, he's not doing anything. He's not really needed for anything other than being Eleven's boyfriend. Which is weird. And 11/Jane, I'm not sure why they still call her 11, even though they know now that her real name is Jane.
Because she's gone by 11 her whole life.
I know, it's just weird to me, because her name is Jane. But yeah, 11. Dustin, I like Dustin. Dustin's a good character. His girlfriend that comes in, I don't know if she's going to play a bigger role in season 5. It's possible. Lucas, I like Lucas. He's a completely different character in season 4 than he is in season 1. Now, I do understand that kids do change as they get older. You change in high school.
Absolutely.
It just feels like they're different characters altogether at certain points in the show. Nancy.
That didn't bother me at all, though.
Nancy might change the least. Nancy might be the character that changes the least. Which is odd, because Steve might be the one that changes the most. But Steve's not a main character in season 1. Jonathan, who is the odd brother of Will's. There's no way to put it other than Jonathan's kind of an odd duck. Dr. Brenner, who is, of course, the villain for the first season. And Mrs. Wheeler is in there more than other parents. She's more well-rounded than the other parents. We'll see if she has an expanded role next season as well. The villains that first season, of course, the Demogorgons and this unseen force, whatever it is that we later find out is the Mind Flayer. But the first season is very, it's a small town, and it's small town it's very grounded. The show's very grounded, even though there's monsters in it. It's grounded. And then season 2, it felt like they expanded it a little bit. You bring in Max and Billy. It felt to me like Max was added because they understood they needed another strong female character. Mm-hmm. There really weren't very many, so they brought her in, which is like, Big Bang Theory when they brought in, all of a sudden there's women, not just Penny. So Nancy wasn't the only main character that was a female anymore, which is good because Max, I love the character. I think Sadie Sink is an absolutely fantastic actress. She's going to be a megastar. Billy, who played her stepbrother, he's kind of a two-dimensional character. Yeah. The interesting thing is once he's possessed awful. and 11 goes into his mind, he's more of a well-rounded character all of a sudden. You start to understand why he does the things he does. Although you see the way his dad treats him and you understand a little bit of that as well before he's possessed. Then Steve became a main character. Steve kind of became one of my favorites. By the time we got to the end of season 4, I think Steve was my favorite. I've seen reactions online where people are upset that Steve and Nancy, are kind of getting back together, although they don't. They don't actually get back together by the end of season 4, but I think they work. I kind of hope they do end up together. I don't like her with Jonathan.
No, that doesn't.
They're just both sad. They're both sad characters. When they're together, they're kind of sad, and when she's with Steve, it's just different. Which is interesting because the first season Steve is quite different from the Steve we see the rest of the way. He goes from being a bully to being a very well-rounded character. Bob. So one of the heartbreaks you had was Bob, who of course is played by Sean Astin, who was Samwise on Lord of the Rings.
I love
He's
Samwise.
been in a lot. He's been in a lot of shows and a lot of movies, and it makes sense to have him in an '80s show.
He's great.
Dr. Owens was added. What I thought was interesting is it's Paul Reiser playing a doctor. Then in the beginning you're like, oh, he's probably evil, and then he's kind of not. And I thought, it's because it's Paul Reiser that I kind of feel like the character's written that way because Paul Reiser's a nice guy, and I was glad he didn't turn out to just be another villainous doctor.
Yeah. Because
we'd already gone through that with Dr. Brenner, who isn't dead somehow.
It's magical.
I don't understand how he gets tackled by a Demogorgon and he's alive because we didn't actually see him get murdered on screen. They don't explain it either. He's just alive. So in the second season, you're dealing with Will being possessed. I thought it was... I won't say it's a rehash of season 1, but there were parts of it that felt like a rehash. And I felt bad for Will because his life's difficult through the whole first 2 seasons. First being stuck in the Upside Down, and then he's possessed by the Mind Flayer after being told, "You challenge it, you challenge it." I'm like, why are you telling him to challenge this thing? And then it gets in his brain. So Will's possessed, and of course we then process from that to season 3, and this is where the show changes.
There
is an abrupt shift from seasons 1 and 2, which are this kind of small town. All of a sudden, the Russians/Soviets come into it, and it goes bonkers. I understand it's 80s, so having Soviet angle and that whole thing, I get it, but it's still turned into a cartoon at parts. There's the one villainous character who is hunting Hopper, and I just referred to him as Arnold Schwarzenegger every time he was on the screen, and I laughed at him.
Silly, yeah.
He was ridiculous. He was ridiculous. He was dressed like the Terminator. He walked like the Terminator. He talked like the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's Austrian. It's not Soviet, but it's a European accent. So it was kind of ridiculous. So every time that the Soviet part was on, I had a hard time taking it seriously. They added Robin. Robin is absolutely fantastic, and the actress playing Robin, really, really bright future for her. But when you're the kid of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman, it makes some sense. She's fantastic. And Erica, who is Lucas's sister, became a main cast member. She'd been recurring before that. I liked the stuff in the ice cream shop. I thought we started to really see the other side of Steve then. The character really evolved. He was becoming a geek at this point too, where him and Dustin had these phrases and they had like high fives and all this, and it was like, yeah, so he's been corrupted by the geeks and he's become one.
He's starting to have fun with these kids.
Yeah, it went from, who are you guys? I hate you guys, to...
this is fun.
Like in the first season, when there's a Demogorgon, he just runs and screams the whole time and he's freaking out. And I was pretty sure he was gonna get murdered, and then he didn't. Season 3, of course, they do the whole Starcourt Mall thing. I'm not sure how all this stuff gets built without anybody asking anything, but it's underground, so okay. And of course, this is where all the Soviet stuff comes in.
Hold on.
I'm not a huge fan of the Soviet stuff. Yeah, what's he? Well, he'll get down because you went over there. Licorice is getting up on stuff he's not supposed to. And now he's going to run around because he's down now. So there you go. But I did think that the Starcourt Mall stuff was odd.
There's a lot odd in this show. So.
Season 3, really, it felt like it's okay. This show has completely changed. It goes from this small town, grounded show that happens to have monsters to crazy, over-the-top 80s. I've seen people complain about the amount of nostalgic stuff. I understand the nostalgic stuff. It doesn't really bother me. We get into season 4, though, and it really goes bonkers. So you take Joyce and Hopper, and I understand that this is about, the kids showing they can do it by themselves and taking the adults out so there's more danger and more peril. But you didn't have to have him in a Soviet gulag for the whole season. And David Harbour, who plays Hopper, he was in fantastic shape because Black Widow, right? So he's playing the dad on Black Widow. So you have to get in shape for that and lose weight. And they tried to make it out like, well, while he was in the gulag, he lost weight. Yeah, but he gained muscle. So I didn't understand.
Because he has nothing to do all day.
But they're not feeding him, they're not treating him well, they're torturing him, and yet he comes out like ripped. And I thought, that's not really how that worked in Soviet gulags. You generally didn't come out, and you definitely didn't get like big and strong and able to overthrow your oppressors. But it turns into Nightmare on Elm Street. So season 4, where you bring in Vecna / Henry Creel, and it's an odd storyline in that every hunch the kids have is accurate.
Yes.
I think it's this. Yep.
Well, by this,
I think this is happening. Yep. You know, my hunch says this. Yep. And all of them are miraculously correct. So in the pitch meeting video that was done, and Ryan did very well on that, he talked about that, and he's right. Every hunch that Nancy had, that any of them have, turns out to be 100% correct. That's handy. They bring in Eddie. Now, I know a lot of people love Eddie. I was with Eddie. I don't understand why people are so in love with Eddie. He to me seemed kind of two-dimensional for the most part, and he's not in the show that much. He's hiding for a lot of that season, and then, you know, he kind of goes out heroically, even though he didn't have to die. Didn't have to. So, of course, spoilers and all that, but if you're watching this, you're well aware of spoilers. Argyle, I thought, was an interesting addition. He's the Jay and Silent Bob type character of the show. Jonathan became Shaggy in this season. He looked like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Yeah. He wasn't really there. And it was odd. I thought Jonathan changed quite a bit. Now I understand why, but he really changed quite a bit. Murray became a main cast member. I like Murray. I think Murray might be a character that could perish in the 5th season. There's some discussion of who might perish in the 5th season. Yeah, there's Licorice. And yeah, I could see Murray being out. Victor Creel, who was played by Robert Englund, showed that the fact that the show felt like Nightmare on Elm Street in season 4 wasn't an accident. They were definitely going for an Elm Street feel, but again, it kind of took me out of some of it. The gruesomeness of the show ramps up as it goes along. Oh my gosh,
so much.
It becomes pretty gruesome. So even though it's
compared
still
to
14A,
there was nothing like
it's still rated 14A, but some of that is
there was a lot that I had to look
graphic.
Away. I couldn't.
Pretty graphic.
Watch.
All the bone snapping.
I've not
the bone snapping in the eyes. That was. Yeah. It gets. And again, the first season there are some kills, and it's not
compared
pretty,
to that though.
But by season 4, it's just ridiculous. And so it definitely feels like a completely different show. Now season 5 is scheduled to drop probably next year. It might be 2024 by the time they get everything done, but it's supposed to come out next year. I would say that the best season, I lean towards season 2 is probably the best season. Where you had the flayed, you had the exploding rats, and that whole storyline. I thought that was interesting and different. That was really unique. Season 1 was good as well. I think season 2 was the best of it. Seasons 3 and 4, even though I loved Robin as an additional character, she's fantastic. I did think that the quality of the show dropped off. If season 1 had been written the same way that season 4 was, I don't know that I would have got through the whole series.
I know I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have chose to watch it if I had known that it was going to be really violent like
there
that.
There are a lot of violent murders.
Yeah, I don't like that kind of thing.
In season 4,
not the show that I started watching.
And there were a couple too that it wasn't like it was advancing the storyline. It was just here's another murder. And
or where it would kill a lot of people, and it would that would be quite gory.
And all of the Russian characters are very two-dimensional. The guy who was flying them in the plane, I referred to him as Yakov Smirnov, because if you're old enough, you'd know he talked and sounded like Yakov Smirnov, which was a caricature more than anything else of Soviets and Russian people. And yeah, I didn't take him seriously. When the plane crashed, and I said to her, I said, they're going to be right near, the Gulag, the Siberia.
Going to be miraculously.
The Soviet Union was a gigantic country. I cannot describe how big they just happened to be right there. And then I was like, well, they'll happen to have another way of flying out. And sure enough, and even though I looked at it and I thought a helicopter would not make that trip. And her and I were talking about this doesn't make a lot of sense, which season 1 didn't have. You had the cool stuff with the Christmas lights, you had the cool stuff with them trying to communicate with Will and people, and then there was the fake dead body and all that stuff. And that was really interesting. But by season 4, there's a lot of stuff where you're like, okay, this doesn't make sense.
There were so many different stories. I hate it when shows and movies do that, where there's so many different storylines.
The finale's in four different locations that are going on at the same time, and it gets kind of tiring and exhausting trying to keep up with all of it.
There's always at least one storyline.
It's one of the lacking.
And one of the main, it was the Russia one, and every time I'd go to that,
one of the main criticisms of the prequel trilogy from Star Wars was the same thing, that you had so many different places that things were going on at the same time, and it was hard to keep up, and it was hard to keep that feeling. The other issue I thought that the show had too was that you'd have something funny happening in one scene, and then something brutally violent going on, maybe in that same scene or the very next, and it just felt like there were these huge tonal shifts that were alarming. Where it'd be, okay, so that's comedy, and this is horrible, brutal violence, and I'm not a fan of this. So it definitely is going to be interesting to see with the next season where they take it, and whether they're supposed to bring it back. It's all supposed to take place in Hawkins in season 5. They're not supposed to add any new characters. There may be a new villain. There's speculation that the new villain's going to be a dragon. That because Vecna, the only one that's more powerful than Vecna, is a dragon in Dungeons and Dragons, and so that would naturally be the next villain, because it's Dungeons and Dragons the whole way through, which I think is an interesting way to take it. But yeah, it's been D&D the whole way through. Each character's had a D&D villain. Like each villain's had a D&D name for it the whole way through, which I think is kind of fun, more fun than playing D&D. I was never a fan of playing D&D myself, but yeah, I enjoyed the show, but it does get really ridiculous by season 4, and the episodes were so long, an hour and a half for each episode. It just and when you consider about 25 minutes to a half an hour that was the stuff in the Soviet Union, it's like, oh no, I don't want to go back to this. Hopper's obviously not going to die. Somehow Joyce and Murray are going to come over and rescue him, even though it doesn't make sense. And all of a sudden, everybody's an action hero. They're all action heroes. And the Soviet Union isn't really all that concerned about the fact that this gulag's been broken into and that these guys are breaking out. And I thought, I think the Soviets would be a little bit more determined to get these people, knowing how important they are and their role and all that. But anyways, it was good to watch, and we've had so many comments on live streams for so many years about Stranger Things. So here we are. What was your favorite season of the 4?
Probably the first one.
Yeah. Very simple story.
If it was just me watching it, I would not have watched all 4 seasons.
Where would you drop it?
I think I would have. Third, it got too ridiculous, and I would have finished there. Just, okay, I'm good.
So the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator.
Yeah, that's when it just started getting ridiculous and extra violent, and no.
And car theft is really common on this show. They just steal cars. Nothing ever happens.
Well,
80s. I know it's one of those 80s tropes, but it is weird. So hopefully Max ends up being okay, but she didn't look okay at the end of season 4. Alive, which is good, but every appendage was broken. All of her limbs were broken, and she was blind. So
I didn't watch that part. That was gross.
I was sad. And it just, one thing I will say for the show, and this is something that I always use to kind of measure how well written horror movies are and things of this nature, is whether or not I care about the people who are being chased by a villain, whether or not I care about the main characters in the show. I do care about the characters in this show. Dustin's one of my favorites. I've actually really grown to like Steve Harrington. I think he's fantastic. Very well written. He is a different character than he was in season 1, but that's by design. And I really... I think Robin's one of my favorites, although the actress that plays Robin has said she'd be fine with Robin dying a heroic death. It would not surprise me if that happens. I have a feeling in season 5 that we're going to see at least a couple of people pass, but, we'll see how that all turns out. So, anything else that you would like to add?
I don't think so.
No. So, season 4 wasn't your favorite?
No, not at all. Nope. It was a very different show. To me, that's not cool that they would do that. It's completely different. So I don't like watching really violent shows. Yeah. I wouldn't have chose to watch it if it had started off being a violent show. It's same with what's the other show we're always asked about with the dragons?
House of the Dragon is the new one now. One. And then it was Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. That's it. Game of Thrones. Okay, we're always asked about that. Game of Thrones, it's too violent for me. I watched the first season. It was too violent. I stopped watching it.
Yeah.
This wasn't violent. It turned into a violent show. I don't like that. I don't think that's cool, because then you start watching a show because it's not that way, and then it switched to a very violent show, very graphic for my standards. There was a lot, almost every episode, or at least I think every episode, there was a part I could not watch. Yeah. I was looking away.
Yeah.
And okay, well, tell me when it's over. Not cool.
Yeah, I was upset by some of the stuff, but I mean, for me, it's not as graphic as like Ash versus Evil Dead. But
see, there's no way I would watch that.
It's not a thing. So, anyways, we'll see how season 5 goes. I hope they bring it back more towards how it started out and give it more of that feel, that small town feel. Hopper doesn't have to be Chuck Norris. He doesn't have to be Sylvester Stallone. Hopper should be relatable and should be a small town sheriff. And I hope they get back to that. And that, him and Joyce end up getting married and all that fun stuff. And, I mean, that would make Eleven and Will brother and sister, but they're kind of already living that way anyways. And hopefully we see more fleshing out of the characters, like Robin, Steve and Nancy. One thing I do want to mention, too, that was weird is in the season 4 finale, they made sure that they put all the couples together, and each couple had their own scene to really, reconnect.
It was worse than Lord of the Rings.
The world could potentially come to an end for all they know, and they're spending all this time talking about their feelings, and it was like, okay, all right, so when one couple did it, we're like, well, that's kind of weird. And then they did it with a second, and then there was a third, and then there was another, and then they started having like, not couples, but people who were friends.
Oh my gosh.
They start, it's been a while, I'm glad we came, oh my gosh, seriously, why are we still... Can we just get to the part where they fight Vecna already?
Is the show over yet?
And the other thing I didn't like either was the jocks. The jock villains. I didn't even have them on the board because
it was silly.
I didn't like the jock villains. They felt like really over-the-top 80s villains in that part too, and just ridiculous. And it was... when the villains are on the way... You shouldn't be like, oh, they're going to show up, aren't they? And that's what I was like, oh. Because it felt like, okay, now they're going to fight Vecna. Oh, crap, they're coming. Great, awesome, fantastic, cool. And then, he beats up on Lucas until Lucas, I guess there was like a med pack in the corner that he got all his energy, like a video game. And then he started winning. I'm like, seriously, this is so dumb. This is not... Fights don't work that way. But anyways... Again, I have no complaint about seasons 1 and 2 at all. Seasons 3 and 4, the Terminator in season 3 was ridiculous, and the Gulag, every scene I wasn't a fan. And they now they've got just Demogorgons running around, the countryside. You think somewhere, right? What if they didn't get them all? What if there's another one somewhere? So there may still be one somewhere out there. All right. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And again, thank you guys so much for the recommendation. We did finally watch Stranger Things to mixed results, and we'll see how season 5 goes. Thank you guys so much. Let me know your predictions for season 5 as well. I'll talk to you guys again soon.